you guys. Okay, this is the design that I came up with for the Halloween themed doormat that we're going to be making. All you have to do to get these SVGs is you can either purchase them on Etsy or find some silhouettes is what they're called, so that there's no color and it's only the outline. Just Google horror icon silhouettes and I'm sure you could find some that you can easily convert yourself. I also wanted to show you how I set up my page in Silhouette. This is the free version of Silhouette Studio. This is what I normally use when I create using my Silhouette, and I haven't yet needed to purchase the paid version. So what you're going to go to is cutting mat and you're going to select none. We are going to be using a cutting mat, but I like to select none so that it does not restrict the size that I'm able to cut. And media size as well, you go to custom. My doormat that I purchased from Target is actually 18 inches by 30 inches, but I'm leaving this set to 12 because that's as wide as my Cameo can cut. So this is how I set it up, and then we are going to hit send. And then I like to choose the fill option and then make sure, since everything is black, it shows you only the color that you have and on the screen. And I'm going to select the black, and then I am going to change my material to vinyl because that's what we will be cutting. I am going to use Craftables vinyl. I need to see which color I have available in this big of a size, but most of my Craftables vinyl is glossy. Now, since we're only using this for a silhouette, we do not need the vinyl to be any specific color. So you could use any color that you have available, and we are going to be cutting this and using it as a stencil on our doormat. Okay, what I did is I am going to use my gold Craftables vinyl because I don't really use it much, so I'd rather not use a color that I use often. And what I did was I connected a 24-inch mat with a 12-inch mat, and I used electrical tape to hold them together. And when I'm cutting something this big, I lay my machine on the floor so that there's enough space for the mat to go in and out of the machine. So let's get started. Okay, once it's done cutting, you are going to weed the design only. Normally you would weed the excess, but since this is a stencil, you are only weeding the outline of it. So this is what it looks like. I did not record because it did take me quite a while with how detailed the design is. The one that I struggled with the most was Freddy, so I suggest if you recreate this mat that you find a different SVG. I'm not too sure why that one was harder than the rest, but it was. If you need help on knowing what pieces to weed, what I do is I pull up my design on my MacBook, and anything that is black, I know that I need to remove from my stencil. So now we're going to put it on the doormat and I will show you how. Okay, I am taking my Craftables transfer tape and I am peeling the backing off just a little, and I'm placing the transfer tape right where the design begins. You want to have a bit of excess vinyl off to the side, as you can see how I do, because it will help you place the stencil on the mat. Okay, once you get your transfer tape on the vinyl, you're going to remove it from the backing, and now you're going to decide where you want your design to be. I use a tape measure to make sure that the design has the same amount of space on both ends. Okay, now the excess piece of vinyl that you left attached to the design, you are going to adhere it to whatever surface you are working on. I made sure to press it down onto my desk to keep the stencil in place, and I am also using a piece of masking tape to make sure that it is properly secured. I do not want this vinyl moving at all, especially when I'm trying to remove the transfer tape. Now this part is going to be the most tedious, and The reason why is because I chose a very detailed design. So what I do is, as I'm going, I cut off pieces of the transfer tape to avoid it falling back over and landing on something that I don't want removed. That's happened plenty of times, and I've had to restart over with my stencil, and I do not want to do that. So I found that cutting as you go is very, very helpful. Now just continue to carefully remove the transfer tape until it's completely gone. Once the transfer tape is lifted off completely, I like to use the masking tape and tape down all 4 corners of the design. This is not only to make sure that no excess paint gets on the mat, but it's also to make sure that the vinyl stays in place as much as possible, since I use a paintbrush. Now this next step that I am about to do, I had never done before. That's a piece of parchment paper that I laid down onto the vinyl. And I saw, I believe it was on TikTok, someone used their Easy Press to heat the vinyl a bit to have it stick better to the mat. And since this is such a detailed design, I decided to give it a try with my iron. Unfortunately, I had the iron heat setting a little too high. So the vinyl does look funky because it melted a bit, but it did work. It kept all my small pieces exactly where I needed them to be. So if you do decide to try this, I recommend you keep your iron or whatever you're using at a low setting to avoid melting your vinyl and causing it to rip. Luckily, I only had one small rip that I was able to cover with tape. Now I'm taking some black outdoor acrylic paint and my paintbrush, and I am going to dab the paint all over the design. I do about 2 coats usually, to make sure that there is no more brown from the mat visible on the design. You're also going to want to let the paint dry somewhat in between coats, because if you get your stencil too wet from the paint, you are risking the smaller pieces and the detail pulling up and moving around. This is what it looks like after 2 coats. I decided to paint Horrors red instead of black so that it could stand out. After this final layer, I will still let it dry for maybe 15 to 20 minutes, just enough to where when I pull the stencil up, it doesn't make a huge mess. It's time to remove the stencil. You just lift up the masking tape and then pull it all off in one piece. Dispose of it right away, especially if the paint isn't completely dry, to avoid getting your workspace dirty. I'm now taking some tweezers and disposing of all the smaller pieces into the cup that I had paint in earlier. Now we are done. I will continue to let this dry overnight before putting it outside, just to ensure that the design does not get ruined. But it is complete and I am super happy with how it came out. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and thank you guys so much for watching.